Good evening, folks, and welcome to the live stream. I hope you had a wonderful week and you're ready for more craziness this weekend. So, of course, there is the good news that Reform UK lost the Caerphilly by-election. This was massive win for Plaid Cymru. So massive, wonderful result for them. And it could be a sign of the times going forward, but we'll have to look into that. A few other stories I want to cover apart from Plaid's win in Wales. What's happening with Nigel Farage, of course, Jess Phillips, and Donald Trump, to cover a few other stories as well. So let's jump right into it. First, of course, is this manhunt that's taking place at the moment. My goodness. Well, let's have a listen to what this story is about.
Let's interrupt that news conference to bring you some breaking news now. And an asylum seeker hotel resident who sparked nationwide protests after sexually assaulting a woman and a 14-year-old girl in Epping has been accidentally released from jail. Well, our correspondent, Molly Malone, is following these developments. Molly, what else do we know?
Well, it's not yet clear how this was able to happen. What we do understand is that Hadesh Kabatu, the asylum seeker, the Ethiopian asylum seeker who was sent to prison last month for the sexual assault of a 12-year-old girl in Epping, he was due to be deported and hence was on his way to go to an immigration removal centre. It's understood that he was released as planned from prison for that transfer to take place, but at some point was mistakenly freed. We're not exactly sure how that happened. We're waiting for an update from the prison service about how it was to happen and where the kind of mistake took place between prison staff letting him out and then immigration removal centre staff taking him to that centre. But I do understand that it's not being described as a kind of police force-wide operation to find him. It's understood at this stage to be contained to Essex Police. We have had a statement from the MP for Chelmsford, Marie Goldman. She said, "I'm closely following developments and I'm in contact with the police and the prison. The police must do everything they can to ensure that this man is returned to custody immediately so that he's deported at once. Once the manhunt is over, there must be a full, rapid public inquiry into how this happened. This is utterly unacceptable and has potentially put my constituents in danger. I expect answers from the prison service." I think we can expect some form of response from the prison service at some point to explain how it was that this was able to happen.
How the heck did this happen? This guy is now on the loose. Now, they're saying that he's within the area. They believe he's within the area. But somebody had said on social media that they saw him boarding a train to London. Now, I don't know if that's even possible or not. But, if you saw the guy, how do you know it was him? Unless you were out looking for him. So, I don't know. This is insane. Brad says, thanks so much, Brad, for that super chat. Get Andrew on the manhunt. He can smell him out. Can smell his own, is it? But this is insane. So some heads are going to roll over this, no doubt. It's not just somebody, but we're talking about somebody who's extremely dangerous. An extremely dangerous individual is out roaming the streets, and he should be in detention, and he's waiting for deportation. Now, of course, Reform are going to jump on this, and the Tories are going to jump on this and try and milk it as much as they can. And it's a massive blunder. So you're probably going to be hearing about this for the next few days, certainly from the likes of GB News, and they're going to be putting pressure on government ministers. And of course, the Justice Minister is going to have to answer some difficult questions here as well. They're going to say, how did this happen? What was who was responsible? And let's hope that the guy is eventually arrested and taken into custody, because, this is going to be something really serious. PMQs is going to be fun. Unless it's been resolved between now and PMQs, but let's hope that the guy is arrested as soon as possible and deported as soon as possible. And that's why it happened. We accidentally lost a prisoner. Was it a minor prisoner? No, it was a pretty serious one. Remember those riots that took place in Epping? Yeah, that guy. We lost that guy. Kemi will go bonkers on Wednesday. Of course she will. Again, she'll go bonkers on Wednesday again. Thanks, Kevin Ladd. Thank you so much for that super chat and that support. So this is a story that's unfolding at the moment. If I hear any more updates, I'll give it to you. But this is gold for Reform and the Tories, and they're going to say, look, Labour should not be anywhere near the levers of power because they're not able to hold on to these people. And this is extremely embarrassing for the government. If the Tories had been in charge, I'd be saying exactly the same thing. So they want to make sure that this guy is arrested as soon as possible and deported as soon as possible, even if it's just for political reasons. Lovely story. Essex police said fast-paced inquiries have shown that the man boarded a London-bound train at Chelmsford railway station at 12:41 British summertime. Oh my goodness! So the guy is, but then I'm not sure. This report is from 6:42, so it's not that long ago. So I don't know if then the police are saying something different now. So. Driving a Luton, I'm not saying that you're not right, but it's concerning if what you're saying is true, because the police are now saying that they believe it's just an issue for Essex police, Essex police. So if he's already in London, then it's no longer an issue just for Essex police. It includes the Met as well. Anyway, guys, let's move on. The main story, of course, is what happened in Caerphilly, where Reform were supposed to win. Reform had topped the polls over the last number of weeks. Nigel Farage and the big guns came down to this little place in Wales, and they were expected to win. But unfortunately for them, and fortunately for everyone else, it went the other way. So what went wrong, and what does this mean for the government and the Labour Party?
If it is repeated, they will win overall majority in the Senate next year, which would be a total disaster for Labour, even more than the overnight disaster that we've seen. I mean, the collapse in their vote to 11% is just absolutely terrible for them.
Let's begin with that by-election victory for Plaid Cymru in Caerphilly, where the party secured 47% of the vote to send Lindsay Whittle to the Senate. Now, it is Labour's first defeat in the area for 100 years. The party was pushed into third place with just 11% of the vote. Reform UK came second with 36%. Now, this was the moment the result was announced.
I give public notice that Lindsay Whittle is duly elected as the member of the Senate for Caerphilly constituency.
And this was Whittle speaking moments later.
Listen now, Cardiff, and listen, Westminster. This is Caerphilly and Wales telling you we want a better deal for every corner of Wales. The big parties need to sit up and take notice. Wales, we are at the dawn of new leadership. We are at the dawn of a new beginning.
As Lindsay Whittle there. And to say that he's a veteran of Plaid politics would be an understatement. He stood for Westminster 10 times, and he stood for every Senate election in the last 26 years. Now, how did Labour respond to coming a pretty miserable third? Well, here's the Cabinet Office Minister, Nick Thomas-Symonds, speaking to Times Radio Breakfast.
This is a disappointing result for us. There's no shying away from that. I went to Caerphilly, I campaigned on a number of occasions, and what I found on the doorsteps was a real frustration about the pace of change that was coming through. And we were listening.
Okay, so it's not just about the pace of change. People are upset that there is no change. They're not feeling the change. It's not just about the pace of change. You have to implement change, and you have to improve people's lives straight away. I know it's difficult, but the policies that Labour have been implementing so far, some of them are good, but a lot of them, the negative ones, even the Labour Party are talking about them. And when it comes to reform, well, you can't beat reform at their own game. You can't beat them on immigration. And what have we heard? Even the Home Secretary is using the term illegal migrants. This is just playing into reform's hands. Now, reform couldn't do I think part of the reason why reform didn't do well in Wales they did well, but they didn't win. One of the reasons why they didn't win is because immigration is not that big of an issue there. Now, I think a lot of people voted for reform because they're not happy with Labour in Wales. They were not willing to vote for Plaid either, but they were willing to back reform instead of Labour and the Tories. So I think a lot of support from the Tories went to reform, and a lot of support from Labour also went to reform, but most of it went to Plaid because people are not happy with the incumbent. So as I keep saying, the way to turn things around for Labour would be to implement policies that improve people's lives and communicate that you are responsible for that.
We've listened to thousands of people on the doorstep. We'll redouble our efforts to drive that change. But look, by-elections are historically disappointing for incumbent governments.
I don't buy this because technically he's right. By-elections are bad for incumbent governments. But if you're improving people's lives and they can see that improvement, then they're going to vote for you. So it's a bit of a cop-out to say, well, it's not our fault really because incumbent governments don't do well in by-elections. There may be some truth to that, but you have a responsibility to improve people's lives.
And this one is no different.
That was Nick Thomas-Symonds speaking to Times Radio earlier. Of course, he's also the biographer, Nye Bevan, a giant of Welsh Labour history. Now, good night for reform, we have to say, if not quite living up to the pollsters' expectations. Here's the party chairman, David Bull, speaking to Times Radio Breakfast.
What people are saying on the doorstep, I was in Caerphilly, is they're sick and tired of the two-party system. And I think it's pretty clear that actually that two-party system is dead. It is disappointing, but actually we're a small party. We were only 4 years old. We're doing incredibly well. We're rising in the polls.
And that was reform.
Okay, but they were supposed to win. Reform keeps saying, look at the polls, look at the polls, look at the polls. Well, the polls are pretty useless. Even the betting markets are pretty useless because Reform were predicted to win. So I think when Reform, Bull my name, when Reform talk about, hey, we're doing really well in the polls, I think you can dump the polls. The polls are a snapshot of the moment, but they're not a predictor. So, the polls need to be adjusted maybe when it comes to what happened in Caerphilly. So, going forward, either we reject the polls or we be very skeptical of them.
Chairman David Bull. And we should say that the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats both lost their deposits, not even in...
The Conservatives lost their deposit. I feel sorry for Lib Dems, but the Conservatives lost their deposit. That's amazing.
Tension. Well, Times Radio's political editor, Anna Mihailova, was at the count. I spoke to her shortly before we started the show, and I asked just how bad was it for the Labour Party?
It was a terrible night for Labour. It is a very significant result because it was clear all night last night that all parties were seeing this in a much bigger context. So it wasn't a normal by-election where traditionally people do like to give an incumbent party a kicking. There was very much this sense of the impact for the Senate elections in May, and then also the impact for Westminster itself. So,
Alistair says Wales is now turning to comedy. Now, just like what happened in Scotland decades ago, the Scots turned to the SNP Max. History repeating it, in my opinion. It's certainly looking that way. It seems that it's possible that Plaid could win a majority in the Senate elections next year. It's a real possibility now. And it could be a situation where you have a Sinn Féin majority in Northern Ireland, you have in Belfast, you have an SNP majority in Scotland, and you have a Plaid majority in Wales, and maybe an English nationalist majority with Reform in England. And then what does that mean for the Union?
So people at the count were bringing up Keir Starmer, the fact that he hadn't come to campaign. They were even suggesting that actually was probably a good thing for Labour. So it's all pretty seismic. I think it's not so much.
It's pretty bad that the Prime Minister didn't go there and campaign. Maybe it was a decision. Let's just let this go There's no point associating Keir Starmer with failure. We know we're going to lose. So it's better that he doesn't go there. Not because he's going to damage them, but because he's not going to help. And he will just be associated with this failure. I think there was probably some tactical vote. Now, I don't know if the Labour Party worked it out with Plaid to say, look, we're not going to really campaign. We're going to let you guys win it. I don't know if that was a decision. Labour are not supposed to take those types of decisions. They're supposed to fight every election. But according to Plaid, there was not a lot of Labour campaigning going on there. So why bother wasting money if you know you're going to lose?
The fact that Labour has lost, it's the fact that it's come third. It's got 11% of the vote.
Yeah, it's very worrying, Bill, that it's still disturbing that the fascists came second. I think the problem here is Labour. It's not so much the Tories. The Tories are pretty much dead at the moment. They may come back, but at the moment they seem dead. I think the problem here is Labour. Labour are so unpopular that people are willing to vote for Nigel Farage's party as opposed to voting for Labour. That's how bad things are. And it's very difficult to come back from something like that. And I don't know if Labour can come back with Keir Starmer in charge. Like, Starmer would need to turn things around completely. He would need to have a vision. And this vision would need to resonate with so many people. I think what's more likely is that Starmer will be replaced and then Labour will do some sort of restart. So the new leader will come in and the new leader will, I hope, have some sort of vision. So this is our vision for the future. This is what we're working towards and this is what we're going to achieve. And everything we're doing is directed at that vision. That's what needs. Keir Starmer doesn't have a vision. Because if whenever he talks, it's about fixing the damage that the Tories left behind. Okay, and you have to do that, but you need to have a vision. You need to improve the situation for ordinary people, and you need to be able to say, this is where we want to be at the end of this Parliament. And we don't know any vision. We don't have a vision from the current Labour administration.
And we have seen a complete collapse of the Labour vote and frankly the support for both traditional parties. I mean, this is
sorry, I just want to Eli says genuine question: if Starmer goes, who will be the next leader? David Lammy, Ed Miliband, Rachel Rees? Who? Rachel Rees certainly not. She's as unpopular as Starmer is. Andy Burnham, says Connor. No, I don't see Andy Burnham. There are too many obstacles for Andy Burnham, and I think what happened with the conference didn't go very well for Andy Burnham. He was seen as something of an upstart, and it didn't really. I don't think it worked in his favour. Now he could come back later, and he still has a lot of support within the party. But I think there are too many obstacles for Andy Burnham. I'd see maybe Ed Miliband or maybe even David Lammy as a future leader. But Ed Miliband is not West Streeting. West Streeting would be the natural successor to Keir Starmer. He's a bit like Keir Starmer. But it depends on a number of factors, and I think we're going to have to wait until after the May elections to see if Starmer has staying power. So I think probably one of the worst things for Labour would be that they do okay, but they don't get rid of Starmer. I think they have to get rid of him, not because he's a bad politician, not because I disagree with him, but because he doesn't have a vision. What does he represent? What is he trying to achieve? We don't know. And you need to have these things when you're in government. One thing is to lack a vision if you're in opposition, but because in opposition all you're doing is opposing. You're presenting yourself as an alternative. But in government you need to have a vision. Boris Johnson's vision, what was it? Get Brexit done and level up. They were his visions, I believe. Were they real? No, of course not. They were based on lies. But at least he had something.
It is part of a much bigger national trend.
Anna, we were led to believe through the polling that this was where Reform were really going to establish themselves in Wales. They came second, and it wasn't really a close second. Now, you cannot take away the huge jump in their number of votes that they received. They have done extremely well. But will this take the wind out of Nigel Farage's sails a little bit?
Look, I think Nigel Farage came 3 times personally to campaign. So obviously they were hoping for a win. And there was a clear sense of disappointment from the candidate, Claire Powell, at the end when the result came in. And critics will say that this shows that reform's momentum isn't real, that it's a flash in the pan.
I don't agree that it's a flash in the pan, and I don't think that their momentum isn't real. I think the momentum is there, but there are limits to what reform can achieve. See, when it came to Wales, they were selling something that the Welsh don't want to buy. This sort of message, this anti-immigration message, I think would be more sellable, trying to think of a better term, more sellable in England. Because Westminster controls immigration. So in Wales, there's no point talking about immigration because, the Welsh Senate doesn't have any control over immigration. The same in Scotland. Reform, I think, are going to have a bit of a struggle selling anti-immigration rhetoric in Scotland. Now, they may be able to tap into some anger that people have, but I think it's going to be limited. But what do Reform represent? Anti-immigration rhetoric. That's all they have. They're a one-trick pony. While that will work in England, it's not going to work very well in Wales, and it's not going to work very well in Scotland. Now, they may try and tap into other anger that people have and try and link immigration to it, saying, well, yeah, immigration, is a problem, but it's having this impact on housing, it's having this impact on public services, and while we can't control immigration in Scotland or Wales, if we control it at the national level, then you'll have more housing and you'll have better services. This is what they'll try and tap into. So they know that public services are under strain in every part of the UK. But where they can sell their anti-immigration message strongest is in England, but not in other parts of the UK, I don't think. And I leave out Northern Ireland because they're not running candidates there at all. What do you think of my message, Max? Look at my message. Let me go back up. One USB. Start again. UBI. Scrap tuition fees. Lift the 2-child benefit cap. Increase taxes on the rich. This should be Labour's vision. This is the Green Party's vision. It's more. I actually asked Zach Belansky when I interviewed him about a UBI, and he seemed on board with the idea or interested in the idea. So I don't know if it was in the interview itself or as I spoke to him after. I spoke to him for a few minutes after, and we did talk about a UBI. So I don't remember if it was in the interview or not. But he was interested in the idea and he would support it, I think. But you're describing the Labour Party's, the Green Party's policy. It's not so much the Labour Party. A Welsh taxi driver, says Suzanne, was disgusted with Brexit when I got into his taxi from Holyhead meeting my friends. That's good to hear. Mashul, you cheated by starting with UBI. Alistair, thanks so much for that super chat. In my opinion, immigration is an English thing. Just as Max is saying, reform will win in England, but not as much as the rest of the UK. I don't know, but I just think there are 2 reasons. One is that immigration is not a devolved matter, so there's no control. The Welsh Parliament, the Welsh Senate, and the Scottish Parliament have no control over immigration. So there's no point banging on the door of immigration there for reform. They can try and bang that drum as much as they want, but I think it's going to be limited in their success is limited. While in England, people believe that if we put reform in power, they will stop immigration. So the message is, it falls on fertile soil. I was having trouble saying that. In England, because people believe that the government can do something about it, but people don't believe anything can be done about it in Wales or Scotland. Now, of course, there are people in Wales and Scotland who think that, well, we just vote for Nigel Farage and he will stop all immigration, even if it's just in Wales or Scotland. Those people exist, but I think they're the minority. This is a question I've been trying to reach out to Scottish unionists, anyone who's a unionist in Scotland who'd be willing to have a conversation, but nobody will respond. And honestly, I've been trying to speak with them. I've reached out to a number of people, been very polite, but none of them want to talk to me. I don't know why. Because I think they'd have some interesting things to say. The media straining to find a Reform UK positives is a powerful laxative because they make constipation look like diarrhea. Thanks, Brad. No better way to describe Reform UK than that. A lot of people replying with to driving in Luton. I need to check out driving in Luton's comment. Where is it gone? I don't see it anymore. I'm not sure what happened there. People left behind everywhere. Anti-immigration feeling is just as high in Wales, and I don't think people know or care if the Senedd has control over it. They just want to support party reform that confirms their bias. I think a lot of those people exist. They exist pretty much everywhere. But I think the vast majority of people coming out to vote understand a little bit more than that, and they understand that, look, we but also it's not just about controlling immigration. I think many people view immigration as a positive in Scotland and in Wales. The issue is not as toxic, not yet anyway, as it is in England. And let's hope it stays like that. Kirsty says Scottish unionists aren't generally talkative, and they know what they know. Okay. I know what I know. Okay, we don't need to talk about it. Anyway, guys, let's move on. This is the candidate who lost in the by-election. Let's have a listen to what he had to say here.
You had Farage come up to the constituency.
Yes.
He's obviously really disappointed. Do you feel a bit embarrassed that you had the big boss come up and that you couldn't follow through?
Sorry, embarrassed. I think the person who's
sorry, embarrassed.
Embarrassed is Keir Starmer, who failed to turn up here because he doesn't care about the constituency of Caerphilly. He doesn't care about the people of Wales. Look at his decisions he's made, punishing pensioners. Look at the decisions he's making every day that affects people here, and he couldn't even face them. That's cowardice. My party leader stood by me at every step of the way, and I stand by my party leader, and I'm proud of the vote share we had here tonight.
Is Welsh Labour dead, in your eyes, considering how they got trounced tonight?
They deserve to be. My goal is for a reform government, so I don't care what they do. Right now, I'm focused on a reform government here in Wales, and we're going to move forward every day for that.
You had for.
So I don't know if we're going to ever hear from this guy ever again, but so he wants to see Scottish Labour die, and it's interesting because he said, well, Nigel Farage stood by me, because Nigel Farage thought that you were going to win. I think if Farage thought you were going to lose, he wouldn't be seen dead. He wouldn't be seen dead near you. So once again, Farage will go where he thinks if Reform had won it, Farage will be celebrating, of course, and rightly so. He'd be celebrating today, but I think this is why we're not seeing much from Farage. He's been very low key. I don't think he actually went. He was supposed to go on a walkabout after the results came in, probably to celebrate, but that walkabout has been cancelled. So when you're saying that the Keir Starmer couldn't be bothered, well, Nigel Farage couldn't be bothered. He didn't go out and ask people, okay, why didn't you vote for Reform? What did we say that was wrong? Why? He's not there to learn from voters. In the same way, I think many political parties, when they lose, they're not interested in learning from voters. They pretend to care what the voters say, but in reality, they just they grumble and they blame the voters and then move on. Is that a Hugo Boss suit that is left over from the war? So Happy played one. Things can only get better. Well said. Beetle Greg. Sorry, Beetle Greg. Thanks for that. Yeah, I think there's a strong possibility now. It's definitely given Plaid Cymru a shot in the arm when it comes to the elections next year. So, if Labour had held on to the seat, I think Plaid would be in a much more precarious position. But I think this has given them a lot of momentum and a lot of positive energy. So a little bit more on Farage here. This one, yes, I want to show you this.
We've just seen how Nigel Farage could be blocked from becoming Prime Minister. The Caerphilly by-election saw Plaid Cymru storm to victory with nearly 50% of the vote. Many of those voters wanted to send a message to Sir Keir Starmer, but they also wanted to send one to Farage. This was clear evidence that tactical voting is alive and well, and that the left doesn't need Labour to see off the reform surge. That's terrible news for Nigel Farage. His party is still leading in every national poll, but he knows that if the fractured vote of the left is united, it would keep him out of Downing Street. It might be hard to imagine a situation where Keir Starmer would work with Zat Polanski or Zara Sultana on anything, but if there's one thing that brings them together, it's a hatred of Farage and everything his party stands for. Plenty of voters have already tried to vote tactically. 1 in 5 did so at the last general election. So the ground is set for a progressive alliance that sees the Nationalists winning in Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland, the hard left sweeping university towns and big cities, and the Lib Dems grabbing the rest of the countryside. Parliament would look like something you'd see in Germany, with weird coalitions that can't really govern properly, but they could certainly frustrate the populist right. Destroying Labour and the Tories was easy, but Farage shouldn't be complacent about 2029. As any leftist could tell you, there's power in a union.
I'm very surprised that the Telegraph put out this video because it's actually quite true. The hard left. We'll leave that aside for a moment. But what she's saying here is correct. If there's tactical voting, if the left decide, look, like what's happened in France on so many occasions, where the left join forces and say, okay, let's keep Marie Le Pen out or Jean-Marie Le Pen out, or the Le Pen, whatever the next Le Pen is, let's keep them out. Then this happened. This works. I'm not a huge fan of tactical voting. I think people should be able to vote according to their conscience, according to their beliefs. But unfortunately, under first past the post, you need to vote tactically in order to kick one party out or to keep another party out. I never thought a Telegraph video would be so pro. Would be parts. I was like, what the hell did he write? Thanks, Brad. Oh my goodness. Thanks, Brad, for that. Yes. This is why Farage is so very careful to avoid the fascist label. Yes, 100% in agreement, Bill. Farage wants to distance himself. He wants to be seen as an alternative to the Conservatives. But a huge problem, I wanted to do a short on this, but I'll just do the little monologue now. A huge problem for Farage is that the more he welcomes the Tories into reform, the more reform becomes the Tories. And he must remember that people rejected the Tories at the last election. So he wants to replace the Tories, but what he's doing instead is he's welcoming, and I think this could undermine Reform a great deal, because Reform try to present themselves as a radical party, as a change. But how can you be a change if you're welcoming in the old school, the old guard of the Conservative Party, the crazies in the Conservative Party? But if you're welcoming in people who are members of the Conservative Party, then you're not change. You're just more of the same. And I think this is something that the other parties could tap into. Look at all the ex-Tories going to Reform. Why would anyone vote for Reform if they're just Tories? People rejected the Tories at the last election. People kicked out the Tories for a good reason. So why would you vote for Reform if you're just getting the Tories again? So while Reform want to replace the Tories, welcoming so many in is not going to be good for the party, I don't think. It's a tactical victory. It's something. Oh, look, we're bringing in all these ex-Tories. They're no longer satisfied working with Kemi Badenoch, with Boris Johnson, with others. So they don't want to be part of this party anymore. They're welcome aboard Reform, because Reform is on the up and up. So this is a tactical victory, but it could undermine Reform in the long term, because you're morphing into the Conservative Party, the same party that was rejected at the last election. Reformer like Lidl and Aldi, same product, different labels. Yes. The key word she ended on was union. Yes, well said. Also, I want him to get even closer to Trump. That will definitely work for us. Yes, Trump is extremely unpopular. Elon Musk is extremely unpopular. So the more Farage panders to those individuals, more Trump, because Trump, and Trump will be out of office by the next election. Well, let's hope, unless he cancels the presidential election. So Trump will no longer be useful to Farage, but also Trump is extremely unpopular, and Trump is going to be extremely unpopular by the end of this parliament. I don't see Trump becoming more popular, so we'll have to wait and see. Guys, we're actually over the time for the comedy moment, so let's load it up now, and I hope you enjoy it. It's brief but funny.
Sorry, I've just had a little shower, but this really couldn't wait. I think we've officially gone into the future. But Instagram now translates you into a load of different languages, but it fucking moves your mouth and everything. It's weird. Okay, so this is me in Hindi. Wait to see this.
ओह ये वीडियो बहुत उच्च बजट के बनते जा रहे हैं। तो सबसे पहले मेरे पास कद्दू पाई M&M's हैं। मैंने कभी कद्दू पाई नहीं खाया है।
Can't get over the absolute blistering speed of my mouth. Look at it going. It's absolutely flying. Seeing myself in Hindi has made me realise I think I'm only using about 2% of my brain. Okay, here I am in Spanish.
ब्रेकिंग बोन्स किटकैट है। मुझे लगता है कि यह सिर्फ वेनिला है। इस पर एक छोटा खुश कंकाल दोस्त है।
I feel like I'm much more serious as a Spanish man. I love the way I say Kit Kat. See, I'm learning the language. Up next we have Portuguese. I'm expecting this to be kind of sexy. Oh wait, this is just me smelling in Portuguese.
Ese es bastante bueno en realidad. Debe ser el artificial, ¿verdad? Dar un 6 de 10.
Kit Kat. That's how you say Kit Kat in Portuguese. I know you were wondering. Anyway, hello to all the new people who understand me in those various language areas. I know Spanish and Portuguese kind of pop up randomly throughout the planet. Well, it's not random. It's colonialism. Solidarity, brothers. Anyway, follow.
Colonialism, solidarity. Oh my goodness. Okay, let's move on. Whoops, what did I do? There we go. Sorry about that. So Channel 4 interviewed some people in Caerphilly for Plaid and for Reform. Let's hear what they had to say.
Reform, yes. Yeah, it's the first time I voted since I was 20 years of age, and I just thought it was about time.
I think the Reform is going to look after their own, which is what we are, and that's what I'm for. So I'm Reform this time, but I was previously Labour.
What is it about Reform that you like?
I'm going to be joining the RAF soon, and I've seen their policies on the armed forces.
So what policies? I haven't seen any policies, apart from we don't like immigrants. Like, what policies is he talking about on the armed forces? Is it because Nigel Farage said, well, we would shoot down Russian planes? Is that the policy? It's not really a policy. It's just something he said on the cuff, off the cuff. Yeah. If Russian planes enter NATO, yeah, we'll shoot them down. Yeah, whatever. It's like, that's their RAF policy. That's their military policy. Weird.
And the pay and everything for that, so I'm going for that.
I think Labour's rubbish. I think Conservatives rubbish. Nobody's done anything really great for us, so let's give Reform a chance.
Plaid.
Oh my goodness, let's give Reform a chance. It's like, let's give Brexit a chance. Let's give leaving the European Union a chance. Let's give the people who are deeply corrupt a chance. Let's give the people who left the Conservative Party to join Reform, who he rejected last time, another chance.
Hopefully anything but Reform.
I feel I do align to some of Plaid's policies, but it was mainly a tactical vote.
Why have you gone for Plaid Cymru?
Because he seems to be the only one that seems to stand up for this type of area, if I'm honest with you.
Why have you voted for Plaid Cymru?
Because I know him
and I like him. And I think he does a lot of work for the community.
That's the candidate, Lindsay Whittle.
Yeah, food bags, schools. Yeah, he does a lot, so he's just always had my vote.
I think this is really important for candidates, is to be in the area, to meet with people, talk to people. What type of area? I'm not sure, actually. All I'm hearing is English voices. Oh, these are Welsh people. Let's give what's so chatty, right? Let's give leaving the ECHR a chance. What's the worst that could happen? The English voice of voting reform. Okay. Anyway, so we're going to have to see how this works out for Farage. Is Farage running out of steam, or is there still a little bit of steam still in the thing in Farage? So Prime Minister has confidence in Jess Phillips after grooming survivor demanded her resignation. So the Prime Minister said on Thursday that Jess Phillips has devoted vast parts of her life and career to tackling violence against women and girls, and has confidence in her despite the turmoil that has beset the process. All 4 survivors who quit the government's grooming gangs inquiry panel said that they will consider returning if the process if Miss Phillips resigns. This is quite damning. However, 5 other survivors on the panel have written to Sir Keir Starmer saying that they will only stay if Miss Phillips remains. So I have this terrible feeling that politicians have got to these people, these individuals, like Kemi Badenoch and maybe members of Reform, and said to them, look, Jess Phillips is not on your side. The Labour government is not on your side. You need to, we need you. If we were in charge, we would have a national inquiry and we would go into all the details of it. And we would punish people unlike what Labour is doing. And because Labour are not succeeding, do you think Jess Phillips should go? We're considering, we want to sack Jess Phillips. Do you think we are right? Stuff, it depends on how you phrase the question. So I honestly don't know why anyone would be calling for Jess Phillips to resign. What has she done? Like, when it comes to these inquiries, they take time. They take a long time. And unfortunately, the previous inquiries' findings were not implemented. The recommendations of the previous inquiry were ignored by the Conservatives. So they need to be implemented first before starting another inquiry. They said that she had remained impartial, had listened to feedback and her previous experience to reduce violence against women and girls, and her clear passion and commitment is important to us. In contrast to the 4 who have quit, who accused Ms. Phillips of trying to expand the inquiry scope beyond beyond the scope of grooming gangs, the 5 said it needs to be widened to focus on child sexual exploitation as well as to ensure, as a whole, to ensure survivors do not fit the generalized stereotype are not excluded. I actually think that Jess Phillips is somebody who cares about this subject. I think she's somebody who cares about women and girls, and she's been fighting for them. And I think, unfortunately, this whole issue has been weaponized by people who are anti-Jess Phillips. People who want to see her brought down. Not because they actually care about the victims here. They just care about damaging Keir Starmer and damaging the Labour Party. The thing is that the English are still thinking that it's not possible to sink England for good, since it's been the heart of the large empire. They're mistaken. Jess Phillips shouldn't go. Morgan McSweeney, on the other hand, I agree with you there, Tommy. If people don't think things can get a lot worse, they're in for a terrible surprise. Decline is a bottomless pit. Unfortunately, it is. Is she too left wing, perhaps? I don't know if that's. I don't know if it's people within the Labour Party that are trying to bring her down. I think it's more the Conservatives and Reform are out for blood, and they see Jess Phillips as somebody easy to bring down because she's associated with an inquiry into something that they believe that they can weaponize. So she's going to be collateral. They may see her as a catalyst to bring down the government or to damage the government. These people don't care about victims. Remember, the Conservatives were in power. They could have implemented the recommendations of the previous inquiry, but they refused to. I don't know why they refused. People should ask them why they refused. Is it because they simply didn't care? Or is it because it was too hard? It was too difficult? They're all lazy. I don't know. I wish somebody would clarify it, because I don't know why they refused to implement the recommendations. First Angela Rayner, then Jess Phillips. I still think Angela Rayner has a future, a bright future. I think a lot of this, when the dust settles and people move on, I think there's a chance that Angela Rayner could come back as a leader. But because what she did was not very clever, but I think it's something that she could recover from. Reform defeated? Tell me more. Well, they've lost the battle, but maybe not the war. Anyway, guys, I want to move on to this story from Sky News, which is extremely interesting and extremely concerning.
These aren't Russians scaling a wall of a warehouse in East London. Not Russians lighting a fire and filming themselves torch a building. And as the fire burns, it's not Russians running away. The fire targeted a warehouse inside this industrial estate in East London. It happened last year. An estimated £1 million worth of damage was done to goods including Starlink satellite equipment that were on their way to Ukraine. The men who carried out the attack were British, but it was Russia that got the blame. These men were convicted for the arson this summer. UK police say these two, the orchestrators, were acting on Moscow's orders. They are Dylan Earle and Jake Reeves, who both pleaded guilty to offences under the National Security Act, the UK's new espionage law. In the trial at the Old Bailey, the court heard Earle was in touch with Russian agents through online messaging apps. These users, the court found, recruited him, instructed him, and promised to pay him. Commander Murphy is the UK's top anti-terrorism police officer.
We are noticing that some people are proactively reaching out online, so they're trying to get in touch with people like Iran, like Russia, and offering their services. Equally though, some people are being approached online to do this, and most of this is online. They are tending to be young men, so late teens, early to mid-20s.
Commander Murphy says Russia amped up a shadow war on the UK after it was accused of the Salisbury assassination attempt on former Russian agents.
We've created a hostile operating environment, particularly for Russia, since Salisbury. And as a result, they need to think of different ways of operating. And so what they're doing is using social media, some encrypted social media, to reach out to young people here.
The East London fire is just one of a number of attacks European authorities believe Russia had ordered. Some are fires, like this one at a shopping mall in Poland. 1,400 small businesses were destroyed. Prime Minister Donald Tusk tweeted that Poland knows for sure that this was ordered by the Russian special services. In the Czech Republic,
this is really concerning because it's not about Russian agents operating in Europe or in the UK as well. This is people who are being paid, our own citizens being paid by the Russians or being given some sort of given something by the Russians to carry out these attacks. This is not like an agent is trained in Russia, travels into Europe and then carries out these attacks. These are people, our own citizens, carrying out, and this is why it's so frigging scary. Because this is really difficult to fight, because you can monitor Russians crossing into Europe, or you can try and monitor them, but you can't monitor people who are your own citizens, and they are the ones who are carrying out these attacks. This is extremely clever, a clever tactic by the Kremlin. They used to do it in the past, but now with social media, it's much easier for them to recruit these people.
Republic, this man was sentenced to 8 years in prison for plotting an arson attack on the capital's public transport network. Officials in Prague openly blamed Russia. In Finland, authorities say a ship believed to be part of Russia's shadow fleet may have dragged its anchor along the seabed, damaging underwater cables in the Baltic Sea. The EU said it was the latest in a series of suspected attacks on critical infrastructure. And last month, 15 people were charged with terrorist offences in Lithuania over the detonation of DHL and DPD parcels, which caused fires in Poland, Germany and the UK. Prosecutors pointed the finger at Russia's military intelligence services and said the plot was a dry run aimed at sabotaging flights to Canada and the US. Over 50 sabotage events, likely linked to Russia, have been logged in Europe from 2022 to mid-2025. The body behind this research says the number almost quadrupled last year. Russia is accused of waging a shadow or hybrid war across Europe.
It's about installing fear, it's about creating division, it's about undermining public services, it's about creating a situation where there is chaos. And Putin benefits from this chaos.
It's sometimes called grey zone. Researchers believe it's because Europe is helping fund Ukraine's war efforts.
And this is why I think it's so important that we don't focus so much on a military response to Russia. We focus on sanctions. We carry out cyber. We deal with cyber attacks. We invest in infrastructure to protect ourselves. And it's not just about weapons. It's not just about boots on the ground. It's about cyber attacks. It's about intelligence gathering on individuals like this. Because some guy who's a citizen of our own country can do a huge amount of damage if he has been instructed the right way. And this is really difficult to defend against. And this is why it's so important as well that we support Ukraine at this time, because they are on the front line. They're the ones fighting Russia toe-to-toe, while we are in Europe and the UK are behind the lines, but we're still taking some of the pot shots from Putin.
Its aim, they say, is causing disruption, chaos, and sowing distrust of government among the public.
For example, when it came to Brexit was not... I don't buy into the idea that Putin funded Brexit or he was behind Brexit, but he saw the advantages of Brexit, and he saw that if Europe is divided, it's less likely to stand up to him. It's more difficult for a divided Europe to stand up to Putin. So Brexit was a huge success in a sense for Putin. Not that he was behind it, but he was happy to fund political parties in Europe that wanted to see the breakup of the European Union. And, you even have the evidence yourself where you had members of Reform, or not Reform, but the Brexit Party and UKIP standing up in the European Parliament talking about how great Putin is and how Europe and NATO were the problem.
Despite the threat, European governments have struggled to respond to sabotage operations. There's been no unified response, no coordinated action, and no effective deterrent measures. At the start of this year, the Royal Navy tracked a Russian spy ship in the English Channel. It was just weeks after the vessel was caught loitering over critical undersea infrastructure in UK waters. The UK Defence Secretary John Healey issued this warning.
And I also want President Putin to hear this message.
I'm sorry, but if these are military vessels, they should be sunk. If they're in international waters, that's another thing. But if they're in territorial waters, they have to be sunk. This is the response you have to do. If there are drones flying into European territory, they need to be shot down. You need to be tough with these people because they'll keep pushing. They need to... The only way to deal with a bully is to push back. And unfortunately, when I heard from NATO, the General Secretary of NATO was talking about, we don't have to be afraid of Putin. We don't have to be afraid of Russia. We can just let their planes come in and then guide them out. No, shoot them down. Farage is saying to shoot them down because he has to. But you have to stop these aircraft. You have to stop these ships. Putin will keep doing these things until there is pushback.
We see you. We know what you're doing, and we will not shy away from robust action to protect this country.
We're very much Russia's adversary. he was running.
Christopher Steele was once Britain's top spy on Russia. He says sabotage is a programme sanctioned from the top of the Kremlin.
They can't get what they want by conventional means. Their conventional armed forces and their economy is simply not strong enough to achieve those objectives in that sort of traditional way, in a way that we would, for example, through sanctions or whatever. That doesn't work for Russia. So Russia has to go into the grey zone and has to fight dirty.
If every time Vodafone is down or Heathrow Airport is closed, or Jaguar Land Rover suffers a cyber attack or whatever, if every time that happens, we, the general population, think, is this Russia? Does that mean Russia is then winning?
It means Russia's having an impact.
Russia denies any involvement in sabotage or hybrid warfare against EU countries or the UK.
Of course, that's what no, of course we don't do that. We never do that. We never did these things in the past, and we'll never do them in the future, of course. If Hitler acted because no one bought his paintings, Putin acts in a way because no one accepted his dream to become a nude model. Thanks, Brad. That's probably it. All stems from that. So we should have allowed him to be a nude model, and then we wouldn't see all this dying taking place in Eastern Europe. The Putin calendar. Oh my God. All young people are hearing from European leaders is austerity and bigotry. You're right. Cyber attacks and security goes both ways. Yeah, no, and Russia is defending itself from cyber attacks, and it's investing hugely in cyber attacks on Europe. And when I say Europe, I'm talking about the UK as well, of course. Let's send agents to Russia, maybe some GB News anchors as cover. Win-win situation, already paid for. They'll blend in pretty well. What about Boris Johnson and his off-the-grid trip and his Russian mates subsequently elevated to the House of Lords? Yes. Well said, Rob. It's like it's there. It's not like this is some sort of conspiracy. It's right there out in the open. Boris Johnson gallivanting off without his security brief to the castle for some sort of weird parties, to the castle of a guy who's linked to Vladimir Putin, and then putting the same guy in the House of Lords. The Lord of Siberia, no, isn't that his name? That one of his titles, the Lord of Siberia. You can't be the Lord of Siberia without Putin's permission. So obviously, and then there was Russia's Friends of the Conservative. Was it Friends of the Conservative Party or the Conservative Friends of Russia? That sort of went a bit disappeared pretty quickly when there was the invasion of Ukraine. And then, of course, Boris Johnson receiving £150,000 to play tennis with the wife of one of Putin's ministers. I joked that maybe she thought she was going to play tennis with Boris Becker, but she got Boris Johnson instead. So did she get her money back? Probably not, because we know this was about donations to the Conservative Party. Why would the Russians give money to the Conservative Party? Because they liked Thatcher. They liked Boris Johnson, who was like Boris. It sounds like a Russian name, so we give him money. Is that how it worked? No, I think it's a bit worse than that. So the Conservative Party are deeply corrupt, and they take money from whoever. And of course, the Russians will be like, "Hey, we have lots of money for you. We can use this influence within the Conservative Party to our advantage." Russia says Longford is real. They're wrong. Olga, don't have this. Olga, don't have the appearance of a tennis player. Boris Johnson definitely doesn't look like a tennis player. Kirsty, thanks so much for that super chat. Maybe the concrete farmer could infiltrate Russia. He's out of a job at the moment. Yes, the concrete farmer, my old friend. I shed I do shed a tear for Mike Graham. He's no longer able to rant and rave in a racist way on Talk TV anymore. He'll have to retire to his to his farming of concrete. He is an obnoxious piece of work, isn't he? So guys, we're almost at the end of the stream. I wanted to cover one final story here involving Donald Trump. Have a listen to this.
Well, there are several reasons, I think, why it has dented the president's ego. Tariffs, of course, are his signature policy. He describes them as fundamental in terms of the future of the United States. And in his mind, tariffs equal winning. But the message from the province of Ontario in this ad is that Canadians are not the only ones losing. Americans are losing too. He'll also really have been irked by the use of Ronald Reagan's voice. You'll remember that Ronald Reagan is a hero to conservative America. His portrait hangs on the wall of the Oval Office behind the Resolute desk. So President Trump will not.
So the Canadians had an ad on TV. Donald Trump saw it, or somebody saw it and showed it to Donald Trump, and his response was to impose tariffs.
Like the fact that he's being used to bash his policy on this issue. And I think it's also worth remembering that this isn't just about a trade war, it's about a media war. We know how often Donald Trump shares his thoughts online, how frequently he has been posting videos online, even AI-generated ones. So he knows the power of visuals and audio. Quite remarkable, really, when you think that this issue is about to go to the Supreme Court, that he's now accusing Canada of interfering, or at least attempting to interfere in that process. So a few VHS clips from 1985 are sparking a diplomatic incident in the year 2025.
The man-child. How do you deal with Donald Trump? You deal with him by either pandering to him or ignoring him, and I don't know which is actually more successful. It seems to be the case of whoever's the last person in the room speaking to Trump redirects US policy in that direction. So guys, I want to say thanks to everyone who came on tonight. Thank you so much to everyone who sent a super chat. Thanks to the moderators for doing a wonderful job. Unfortunately, I won't be on the post-stream chat tonight, so I will see you on Tuesday, same bat time, same bat channel. And let me know in the comments about the PMQs. Do you like the PMQs? Do you find it interesting? We get a good few people on, but I'm not a huge fan of the theatre of PMQs, but if you guys find them interesting, I'll continue to do them. So have a great weekend, guys. Stay safe, take care. But before we go, we have our one for the road, so I hope you enjoy it.
Hi, I'm Johnny Smash. Comedian, truth teller, Guinness World Record holder for the number of times I ask, what do you do in a comedy special? You might know me from my sellout comedy tours. Yeah, I said it, uncancelled. Never apologise, never explain. To be clear, that's my motto, and those women are liars. I've always believed that comedy is about smashing boundaries and crushing sensibilities. Liberals, watch out. I'll take on any taboo and slaughter any sacred cow. Wokeness. White privilege when suntan lotion's this expensive? I don't think so. Transness. If a man can identify as a woman, can I identify as being exempt from tax? Seriously, is that possible? Joe Biden's old. Joe Biden's so old, he remembers black and white TV. Yeah, I said it. It's all about freedom of speech, baby. Facts don't care about your feelings. And if you can't take a joke, then just grow a pair. Now I'm here today to tell you about my new tour where I go to all the places that people said I couldn't go and speak my truth. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. I don't think women should drive. Have you seen them try to park? Maybe those journalists didn't disappear, they just got lost because they were relying on Apple Maps. Because it is bad. Don't talk to me about human rights. Last time I went to Starbucks, my coffee was cold. Where's my human rights? He knows what I'm talking about. The Democratic People's Republic of Korea. Kim Jong-un? Kim Jong-unbelievably great, am I right? Have you guys seen K-pop? Oh, you're not allowed. Well, that's good, because you're not missing anything, because, you know, like, synchronised flag waving is much cooler. And I'm not just saying that because of the contract. The intergalactic empire of Krog. I actually think harvesting humans for fuel is no more than we deserve. I mean, have you seen Love Island? 1,000 years of intergalactic servitude? We've earned it. Book your tickets now. Or don't. They're paying me either way.
Wonderful, wonderful. Oh, we have a chat from Brad just right in there at the end. Boris likes Russia because Russian women contain many more women. That's true. That's true. That's why Boris likes them. You buy one and you get 5 for the price of one, or you don't buy them. The Russians just give it to you because you're corrupt. So guys, have a great weekend. I'll see you on Tuesday, same bad time, same bad channel. Stay safe, take care, and good night.